you're not there. Go back to when I saw you. A beautiful time in a deadly year. You think I'm stupid, but I get it now. How long can we make this go? Just hurry up and spit it out, baby, cause I got to know. Don't break away, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay. Don't break away, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay. Don't break away, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay. Don't break away, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay. I let it consume me, I let it control me. I'll always be lonely, I'll never be fine. If life is a movie, it's always so boring. Where is the story? I hope it gets better with time. Yeah, I hope it gets better with time. Yeah, I hope it gets better with time. Don't look back when I call you, but does that mean that you don't care? Go back to when I saw you, your beautiful eyes with a deadly stare. You think I'm stupid, but I get it now. How long can we make this go? It won't hurt to let it out, baby, cause I got to know. Don't break away, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay. Don't break away, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay. Don't break away, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay. Don't break away, cause I want to stay, cause I want to stay. I let it consume me, I let it control me. I'll always be lonely, I'll never be fine. If life is a movie, it's always so boring. Where is the story? I hope it gets better with time. Yeah, I hope it gets better with time. Yeah, I hope it gets better with time. Yeah, I hope it gets better with time. 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 Time. Yeah, I hope it gets better with time. I hope it gets better with time. I hope it gets better with time. I let it consume me, I let it control me. I'll always be lonely, I'll never be fine. If life is a movie, it's always so boring. Where is the story? I hope it gets better with time. Yeah, I hope it gets better with time.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So today what I wanted to do, let me switch over to my camera, sip of water. What I wanted to do today is I wanted to, this will be getting started onto something new. This is about where we should have been on the course. To an extent. I mean, this is, this section right here, for some reason I'm still peaking my microphone. Let me adjust my gain. 5. Okay, that should be a lot better. This is where we should have been at the week before spring break was on evolutionary biology. We're still on track with where we need to be, but we're going to start on evolutionary biology. And I'm actually going to I'm going to draw out a lot of these concepts and ideas. This will be like kind of the format going forward of me kind of drawing stuff. So this will be like a whiteboard. So let me switch over to my camera. So one of the things we're going to start with is this is going to be start by talking about evolution. And one of the things with evolution is that there's a lot of misconceptions about what evolution is. All right, there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and what I mean by that is that well, we all know that it's a controversial subject kind of outside of biology. Most biologists kind of agree with it a little bit, as far as, like, you know, they're all on board the same page saying yes, evolution is a thing that exists. And a lot of the people that attack biology don't exactly understand what it is, or attack evolution don't exactly understand what it is. They think that it's this concept or this notion of, you know, things change because they want to, but it's more of that things change because they're forced to. So whenever we refer to this, for the most part, we're going to refer to it as my drawing skills with a mouse are terrible, and my writing even less so. So we're going to refer to it mostly as natural selection, and you'll hear me call it selection. There is artificial selection, all right? Animals and things like that we breed specifically to bring out certain traits, plants that we breed to bring out certain traits, that is artificial selection, and we'll talk about that next week. But natural selection, all right? So let's say you have an environment, right? And in this environment, you have some plants, some lower plants, right? They're kind of down here, and then you have some trees, and then I don't know, just to add some variety, there's some bushes that are over here. All right. So you have this variety within the environment, right? And that variation exists also within other animals and other species. So for instance, if you have a you have this horse-like species, okay? Look, get over the pictures. Okay, I know I suck. You have this horse-like species, and then let's say there's some variation that exists within them. So you have some that have medium-sized necks, some with short necks, some got his tail, and some with really tall necks, right? And these guys, they're going to mostly eat off of the trees. These guys are mostly going to eat off of the short plants, and these guys are going to mostly eat off of bushes and things like that. All right. So this is the same species. You can give the species whatever name you want. We know where I'm going with this, but let's say you want to call it whatever you want, right? This species is able to survive however it wants, right? There's a lot of variation within the species itself. There's a lot of variation in the plant life that exists, because you have these shorter plants down here, you have the bushes, and then you have the trees. So there's a lot of variation that exists within this environment. And that's fine, but let's say that there is a new pest, right? There's a pest that makes its way over that only eats these short plants, all right? So you instantly know that these short plants are now gone from the environment, all right? So this pest that comes over, this, let's say it's a beetle, because beetles are the most diverse group on the planet. These beetles end up eating all of these short plants, or let's say a majority of them, right? What is going to happen with, let's say you have A, B, and C. Given a length of time, what would you expect to happen among these different species? Well, if A can't reach this plant right here, you would expect A to basically be eliminated. So I guess I should have done that in red so that it's a little bit more obvious. So you would expect that species A is now gone. It's not able to compete. All right. So that's going to introduce us to a term, competition. All right. Competition. And you could think of this as the same competition as I'm going to enter a running race, right? There are only so many resources, and everyone, animals A, B, and C, are trying to get a hold of those resources, all right? And if animals A, B, and C are trying to get a hold of these resources, there's going to be a clear winner. Now, in the situation where you have tall, medium, and short plants, everyone wins, all right? Everyone gets a medal. They have 13th place ribbons that they're giving out. But we know that that's not necessarily the case of how it happens, because if all of a sudden, you know, this beetle comes through and it wipes out all of these plants, so now there are no short plants, all right? So there are no short plants anymore. You've wiped out all of these plants, and these now the resources are not being shared equally. Remember, C can still reach the tall plants and B can still reach bushes, all right? But now this variation of A has been completely removed from the environment. Does this happen overnight? No, it happens over a period of time. Because remember, the beetles are going to come in at one point. We brought up a map. We brought up a map on Monday where we talked about how certain things spread out from epicenters. And the thing is that when we talk about stuff spreading out from an epicenter, so you have the start in the middle, and eventually it will make its way out further and further. So if you're looking at a landmass, right, let's say you have, this is this area where all the vegetation exists at. What's going to happen is you're going to have this insect that's introduced into one side, and it's going to start to make its way across, which is going to force all of those animals to move over in one direction. All right. So A will eventually remove itself from B and C because it has to go and try to find other plants. But what happens once all of its food is removed? Well, once all of its food is removed, then that's pretty much it. All of its food is removed. I'm still peeking the microphone. Let me see if I can. Let me increase my. Let me change my compressor. I hate using compressors because they distort audio, but or it decreases audio quality, but I'm peaking my microphone out. Okay, so all the short plants are gone, and now over a period of time will be completely gone. And they have basically been outcompeted because they are not able to compete for these higher resources. Think about it as Usain Bolt trying to run a marathon. He'll smoke every single person on that line out of the gate, but after 100 meters, 200 meters, a mile, he's going to be near the back of the pack. And then everybody else is going, or all the distance runners are going to kind of catch up. So they're out of this race now. So all you have is B and C because there's still a prize for them. You still have the medium distance and the long distance left. But let's say you end up running into a large period of drought. All right, you run into a large period of drought where you don't end up getting a lot of water. And so notice that these are natural conditions. This isn't, I meant to do red for that one, but it didn't select red. These are natural conditions. These are not people went through and harvested everything, or people removed this, or people removed the trees or anything like that. But this is more of, a beetle took care of the short plants, and now you end up with drought taking care of trees. All right. So now all of these trees are completely eliminated. So what has happened is that you have, I'm not even going to worry about that. You have completely eliminated all of the trees. So there are now no trees. And along the same lines, what's going to happen to C? Well, if it's a drought, remember droughts can be short term. So that will cause a reduction in this population until it goes on long enough that there are just completely no more plants left for them to eat. And then C, I'm going to do that in red again, matches, C will be completely gone. All right. And you have to think about this as once A disappeared, who's left to mate? Well, C and B. What happens when C's gone? Who's left to mate? Well, just B. And that means that B will become the dominant phenotype. And remember, it is phenotype that we're hitting on here. All right. Oh. I know my drawings suck. Just get over it. So the dominant phenotype here is now phenotype B, which is the one with the medium length neck, who eats the medium-sized plants. So then I can't think of a situation. Let's say a new species comes along. Let's say yellow is a terrible color on this background. Let's say you end up with a bird. All right. There's its like tail feathers. There's its little wing. There's its other wing. All right. He's a little crooked. So this is the crooked bird. And let's say he eats let's say he eats only the berries from this plant. All right. Is there any competition between the bird and the horse-like animal? Well, no, because remember, this guy is eating the leaves and this guy's eating the berries, which means that they do not have an overlap in their environment. Yes, they interact with each other and they do eat off of the same plant, but there's no competition there. It would be like if we went to a restaurant and they only had one salad and they only had one hamburger, but they could not make any more. So we go into a restaurant and I sit down and I'm like, I want the hamburger, and you're like, I want the salad. If that happens, then there's no competition there. We each get a fair share of different resources. But let's say they have one hamburger and one salad and there's three of us, or there's one hamburger and one salad and we both want a salad, or we both want a hamburger. Instantly you have introduced this level of competition that didn't exist before. And so when that happens, there is a detriment to both species. All right. So competition by its nature is a negative interaction. All right. Because even if you win, even if let's say the bird species ends up winning because it's able to jump from plant to plant extremely quickly, while this animal takes a very long time to move from space to space, even if that happens, there will still be detriment to this bird excuse me, because it will not be able there will be detriment because it has to move between those plants rather than finding one place to settle. So competition by its nature is a negative interaction. It's like predation. Predation is a negative interaction, and predation is a form of competition. You have to think about it like when we talked, let me pull up a new paint window. When we talked about the ultimate grudge match, right? Lion versus gazelle. Lion versus gazelle. Why are there no such thing as a slow lion? Well, because gazelles are fast. And why is there no such thing as a slow gazelle? Well, because the lions are fast. So notice how in this, the lions have to get faster in order to catch the gazelle. And what's going to happen? So let's say you have, this is where we're going to get involved in a little bit of math. So hang on a bit. So this is speed, all right? And then this is the number. So let's say in gazelle, we'll label gazelle as purple, and we'll label lions as red, all right? If you have a gazelle population that has a nice bell curve distributed speed ratio, right? And then your lions have a speed like this, still a bell curve, but it's a little bit more compressed. What's going to happen to, I'm going to pick a different color. I'm going to pick blue. What's going to happen to this group of gazelles right there? Well, they're not going to survive. And then at the end of the season, who's going to be left to mate? Well, these guys, because they survived. But then next season, what's going to happen to this group of lions? Well, they're not going to be fast enough to keep up to the gazelle because they've taken out all the slow gazelle. So what has to happen at that point? Well, the lions instantly, you've caused a shift in your curve like this to make your gazelle faster. And if your lions were like this before, these now have to move over, all right? And now you have to end up with faster lions. And so you could see this kind of give and take that's occurring in this situation. Hold on, I'm looking up something really quick. So what we call this is we call this an evolutionary arms race. So why do we call it an evolutionary arms race? Well, an arms race is hypothetically, it's because you are an arms race is where you're trying to get better weapons than everybody else. In this case, the lions and the gazelles aren't getting better weapons. Well, kind of. They're getting better speed. All right. So the lion's weapon against the gazelle is their speed. They're able to chase, catch, and kill a gazelle. The gazelle's weapon against the lions is escape. It needs to be fast enough that it can escape from the lion. All right. So that is why we call this an evolutionary arms race. All right. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about this, that the reason that there are no slow lions is because the lions want to be fast. The reason lions have to be fast is because they have to catch up with their food. It's not that they want to be, it's that their survival relies on that. So then take something like a bear, for instance. All right. So we'll scroll over a little bit. So take something like a bear. I'm not going to draw a bear. I'm just going to. So that's a bear. He's happy because he's actually watching these lessons and not, sleeping in. So he goes to attack. Let's say there's Let's say there's a small mammal. All right. Let me choose a different color. Say there's a small mammal over here. Like, I don't know, like a raccoon animal. It's dead. All right. It goes to attack that. And this thing gets away. All right. It escapes. Obviously, the bear is going to be a little upset, but he's cool because bears have an advantage that then bears can also eat berries from plants. So that is their strategy for dealing with this. So why is it that bears aren't blinding fast? I mean, they are really fast, but why aren't they blinding fast? Well, because they have options. All right, they're able to eat almost anything they want. Go back to the restaurant example, right? Let's say there's a hamburger and then there's a salad. I want the hamburger because it's my favorite food. But if you also want the hamburger, well, too bad. I have the hamburger, and that's an argument and a fight that I'm going to win. So what do? Well, you have to be cool with, hey, I'm going to eat this. I'm going to eat this salad. And so that's the option that the bear has. The bear wants to have this. He wants to have, like, let's say he wants to eat a raccoon, but he'll settle with berries if he can. All right, and that's where you kind of run into these positives behind it. Last thing I wanted to go through was how we got to this point. All right, so evolutionary ecology is down to this guy named Darwin. All right, down to this dude named Darwin. He was on a ship called the Beagle. There's actually a supercomputer at the University of Chicago named after this ship. It's used for genomic research. And so Darwin comes around, and most of the time what would happen is exploration ships would go underway, and then because you're going to new places, you have the crew that actually operates the ship, right? But most of them are manual laborers. Their ability to read and write is very low. They're not educated. They're literally there to provide a service, and that is to take care of the ship. So what they would do a lot of times is they would take along, well, you need a doctor on the ship because people are going to get sick. And you're also going to take along, because you're going to new places, you take along a naturalist. And a lot of times they would be the same person. All right. Your ship's doctor would also be a naturalist. And so you take along a naturalist, which is literally a dude that goes out and he picks up a plant and he's like, this is a whatever, or they describe it. So if you ever see, I'm going to pull up a description of, let's do Canadian goldenrod. All right. So, let me find so with Canadian goldenrod, there is a way that you can describe it. All right, so here's what it looks like. It's a really common plant around Indiana. You'll start to see it flower in a few months, but what it is, it's herbaceous, meaning that it has green, or it's green. It's not a tree, so it doesn't have wood. Perennial, meaning that it comes back every year, with a central stem that is 2 to 6 feet tall. Again, this is a regular website. If it was a biology or a scientific website, it'd be in meters. It's because the wide distribution exists to several varieties or significant varieties in ecosystems. the alternate leaves, alternate meaning that the leaves, one of them will come out here and then the next one comes out up here, but they're never directly across from each other. So you could see, kind of zooming in on this, how these two leaves, there's a gap that's about the size of my mouse cursor between them. So it's alternate. They're 2 to 6 inches long and 1 inch wide, becoming slightly smaller toward the apex of the plant. They're lanceolate to broadly linear in shape. So lanceolate is a botanical term and usually have small teeth along the margins, margins being the edges of the leaf. Otherwise, margins are smooth. The stems have lines of white hairs also, and that's also called while the underside of the leaves are pubescent. All right. Why are those terms used? Well, those are a lot of the historic terms that have been used to describe plants. So you'd take a dude along with you and he would be a naturalist and he would look at all this stuff. And Darwin was a naturalist. So he is a naturalist. Naturalist. So he's very well educated. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to different things. And they end up down in the Galapagos. So I'm not even going to attempt to spell it. The Galapagos Islands. All right, they're the chain of islands just off of South America. And he goes there and he finds finches. Finches are a type of bird. And so he goes out and he collects these birds and things like that. And then if you are not an expert on something, you collect it and then bring it back for later analysis. For instance, when we do research up in Michigan, we collect a sample of each of the plants and then we give it a name. We'll put down like unknown lanceolate leaf or unknown smooth deltoid leaf. And that gives us a small description about it. We can count it and then we put it into a plant press. Plant press being this like wooden thing that has paper in the middle to help keep the leaves dry. So you put it in there and then at night we go back to our campsite and we open up the plant press and then we have books that we use to look through that don't go out in the field, that stay at the campsite. And we look through those and we try to find what the plant is based off of different measurements. Because remember, when we're out in the field, it's hot. We're trying to collect as much stuff as we can so that we can get back to the campsite and relax. And once we're back at the campsite, that's when we can ID stuff. Could you imagine how slow data gathering would go if all of a sudden you're going along and then you run into a plant that you don't know? So I should have done that in green. You run into a plant that you don't know, and then you have to spend time IDing that plant before you move on. And then you find another plant that you have to ID. Yes, the first day would go really, really slow. But then after that, because you know what these plants are, then the next days would go really fast. But what we do instead, because we have this time off, well, time off used loosely, you would take these plants back to your campsite. All right, so you take these back. That's a terrible arrow. To your campsite where you can ID. That's a leaf. And then here's another one that's heart-shaped, where you can ID these plants later. All right, and then after you ID the plants, then the next day when you go out, you can, have a name for them. And so Darwin found finches and he collected them. And then when he was done, he took them back to England. All right. Remember, at this time, this was 1800s. England was kind of a powerhouse, right? They had a lot of territories and a lot of influence overseas. So it's really it's kind of a common thing that England would send out a lot of these explorers. Like if you look at a lot of the early people who were naturalists, they tend to be from England. Yes, there were some from other countries, but a lot of the times the naturalists tended to be from England. So you had Darwin, and then a lot of times you would have kind of I don't want to say an apprentice, but like a guy that was working under you. And for Darwin, it was this guy named Huxley. And then one of my favorite biologists is a guy named JBS Haldane, John Burton Sanders Haldane. He was a British scientist in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. The picture of him, let me pull up a picture of him, but the picture of JBS Haldane is of him holding a cigar in this pinstripe suit with this wicked mustache and part. He was a really famous British scientist. So he lived from 1892 to 1964. So he would have been through the early to mid 1900s or 1900s, yeah. But he was a really famous biologist, did a lot with evolutionary biology, but also did, back then it was difficult to kind of do one thing. So he worked a little bit with psychology and genetics and did some math. But his big contribution was in biostatistics, which I'm a big fan of. I like doing biostatistics to an extent. I don't like doing big data sets, but I do like doing biostatistics. But a lot of them that was kind of a rant to say a lot of them tended to be from England. So he brought all these back to England, and scientists started to look at them. Now, he didn't know that they were all finches. He just knew that they were birds that he had collected. I mean, he knew a little bit about them, but Darwin's not an idiot. And the scientists were like, these are all finches, but they're all designed, or their beak shapes have different functions. All right. So some of them are able to crack open seeds and get to what's on the inside of it. Some of them are meant to, drill in and get into fruit. And some of them are made to chew on smaller fruits. And so they had this wide variety of what they were able to do. So he had this idea that, now the thing is that none of them overlapped. All right. They were all found on different islands. And if they were able to eat berries, do you want to guess what type of food was found on that island? You're right, it's berries. And I know it sounds really stupid, but at the time, this was sort of a new-ish idea. There were some Greek philosophers that kind of talked about this a little bit beforehand, but each of the places that had these birds, they also had the ability to eat these fruit and to do all of this stuff. And it was unique at the time because no one had really kind of like written all of this stuff down and kind of hypothesized that, what if this was the case? And so he did a lot of research talking about how things had to fit their environment, right? And then he ended up going to Madagascar and moths. I'm not even going to attempt to draw a moth. But if you look at a moth, this is its tongue right here. So it's this rolled up kind of proboscis, all right? And what it does is if it wants to eat something, it straightens it out. And so you could have these moths that will straighten their tongues out and get to the nectar that's at the bottom of these plants. And so Darwin found a plant. Do orange. We found this plant. And it had kind of the flowers and stuff at the top of it. And then all of the sugar was at the bottom. And when he measured this, I think it came out to like 18 inches or something like that. And so he predicted that there had to be this like that's a moth. There had to be a moth that was able to reach all the way to the bottom and get to the sugar or the nectar that was at the bottom. He never ended up finding it. Well, he ended up dying, as people do. You know, they get old, and Darwin passed away. But later on, somebody found this moth. And the reason that he knew that it had to exist is because this plant would not have existed if this moth didn't exist. All right. This plant would not exist if this moth wasn't here. And so that was the big thing, was that he predicted that existed based off of his knowledge of evolutionary biology. And basically saying that, you know, these plants exist because of these moths. So if this plant exists, this moth has to exist. Remember, like the old standardized testing that you used to take when you were in like elementary school and things like that, where it'd be like, driver is to car as cyclist is to blank. And he sort of did the same thing. Like if this moth with a short tongue pollinates this short plant, then a moth with a long tongue, or what has to pollinate a long plant? Well, it has to be a moth with a long tongue. And so that is where he got a lot of his ideas from, was just by observing it. Now, I notice how I called him a naturalist. Now, naturalists still exist, where you go out and you see something and you describe it and you identify it and put it into an evolutionary classification based off of its phenotype. All right. Notice I brought that word up quite a bit, phenotype. And phenotype, remember, PH for physical, that is looking at the physical appearance. Because as with this moth and the shape of these plants and the beaks on these finches and the lions and the gazelles and the horse example from the first example, it's all based off of the physical appearance of the animal. All right. Evolution acts against the phenotype. So the definition, if you want to put down a definition of phenotype is, it is changes pressured onto the phenotype, which alters the genotype. All right. It's pressure or selection against the phenotype, which alters the genotype. Why does it have to alter the genotype? Well, because if you are, that's the bear. If you are animal B, right? It doesn't do you any good to be able to eat this plant if you can't pass those genes down to your offspring. All right. I think I used this red. So here's little baby animals. All right. And medium-sized necks. It doesn't do any good if you can't pass those traits down to your offspring. All right. So this is the big part of it. It is phenotype that affects genotype so that you can pass those traits down. Now, we'll get a little bit more into this next week. We'll start talking about coevolution, which is how this plant and this moth influence each other. We'll also talk about artificial selection, which is how we influence it. All right. But as far as today, that's all I'm going to do for, that's all I'm going to go over for today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post some assignments on PowerSchool this afternoon. Remember, directly after this, we're doing office hours on Google Meets. The link will be in your PowerSchool. Again, if you have questions, if your parents have questions, make sure they email me. What I'm going to do is tomorrow will be a lesson for AP students. And then Friday, I'm going to do a lesson in general for everybody. What else? Assignments for this will be posted on PowerSchool. Make sure that you are checking PowerSchool. If you know of people who need to improve their grade, tell them to check PowerSchool. They need to be watching these videos because these are just not here so that I can, you know, spend 45 minutes to an hour every morning going through bio. Watch these. These are going to be your lessons moving forward. The plan is to prepare you for next year or, you know, whatever's next. And in order to do that, some of this stuff that we're going over is going to be necessary for what we're doing next, or what you guys are going to do next. There are 2 more lessons in the school year. We're playing this out like nothing is happening out of the ordinary, except for the fact that I'm behind a camera and a microphone, and you guys are behind a screen. Check Power School every few days. These VODs are going to be on YouTube to watch later. Again, if you have any questions, bring those to Google Meets after this. But I'm going to be ending here. Check Power School for assignments on this. And I will post the link to I'll post the link to the Google Meets on Power School after I'm done with this. All right. So if you have any questions, send me an email, but thank you for tuning in.